Now it's time for Lefties Losing It. Remember when Trump tried to get the esteemed journalists of 60 Minutes to actually do their job and cover the Hunter Biden laptop story in the lead up to the 2020 election?
You know, this is 60 Minutes, and we can't put on things we can't verify.
You won't put it on because it's bad for Biden.
We can't put on things we can't verify.
Leslie, I don't have to discredit you.
But that's what
You've discredited yourself.
You told me that.
Leslie, you've discredited yourself. When you say that you're not going to cover Biden, you're going to ask him what flavor ice cream he has, okay?
That's not
Instead
easy.
of why did Hunter get $3.5 million from Moscow? Instead of why is an energy company paying your son $183,000 a month or whatever they're paying him, and he has no experience in energy. You know, you discredit yourself. I don't have to discredit you.
So this story about Hunter and his laptop, some repair shop found it. The source is Steve Bannon and Rudy Giuliani.
The source is Steve Bannon and Rudy Giuliani. Can you believe that nonsense? And she wasn't done discrediting herself yet. She's supposed to be the very best, among the very best, the cream of the crop. Can you see why trust in the media is at record lows?
And you're making this one of the hottest, most important issues in your rallies.
It's a very important issue to find out whether or not a man's corrupt who's running for president, who's accepted money from China and from Ukraine and from Russia.
All these
I think
things
that's
have
an
been
important issue.
investigated and discredited.
It's incredible the way you can try and say this and sit there and look me in the eye and say it.
A Republican
He accepted money,
committee.
his family, from Russia, from Ukraine, from China, and from other places.
And a
His
Republican-
brother, who didn't have experience, became a big builder in Iraq without experience. Take a look at what's going on, Leslie, and then you say how that shouldn't be discussed.
I'm saying
It's the biggest scandal out there, Leslie, and you don't cover it.
because it can't be verified.
You want to talk
I'm
about
telling you.
insignificant things.
I'm telling you.
Of course it can be verified. Excuse me,
We
they
cannot
found the
verify.
laptop. Leslie,
Can't
Leslie,
be verified.
what can't be verified?
The laptop.
As you saw from the captions there, it wasn't unverified. It wasn't a fake story. It was very much real and implicated not just Hunter Biden, but Joe Biden. The New York Post did a series of bombshell stories on it well before that little interaction. And let's not forget, the media, including 60 Minutes, for 4 years, pushed completely unverified Russian collusion hoax stories, but they chose not to cover that crucial story in the lead up to the 2020 election. And never forget, they impeached Donald Trump for wanting to investigate the very crimes Joe Biden just pardoned his son for. Now, let's go to CNN. They're still defending the president. Apparently, Trump is going to go around and shoot everybody. And if Biden didn't pardon his son, what would happen next? What?
You can defend it, but wasn't it a lie that he was not going to pardon him?
No, I believe the circumstances have changed. I think that we now have a president coming into office who's talking about firing squads, who's talking about running people around the country and making sure that everyone who's his enemy is going to be punished.
Firing squads, really? These people are nuts. But not to be outdone, the ladies of The View, led by Whoopi Goldberg, have decided that it is Donald Trump's fault that Biden lied and pardoned his son. Try to keep up with this logic, if you can call it that.
I'd stop calling it a lie. Okay. Well, here's what it says. It's a precedent for all of us to open our eyes because we've elected someone who is in a similar situation, who didn't have a drug problem, who knew what he was doing, who clearly stood and said, I can do this. And he did it. So I think, for many, many reasons, this is very different than any other situation that we have ever dealt.
Now we've got Jon Stewart, another lefty, losing it, but at least he did try to inject a little humour into proceedings. Sure, as usual with Jon Stewart, he is years late to the party. He said nothing about this Biden family and their dodgy business dealings when it actually mattered. But now, in the final weeks of Biden's lame duck presidency, he's bravely cracking jokes.
Democrats have a moral perch from which they can judge without shame, hypocrisy, or nuance.
Breaking news, President Biden has issued a pardon for his son, Hunter Biden.
Mother... We were so close.
You know what? It may be a little gutless to finally be showing some interest in the Hunter Biden laptop story and what it all means, but at least Stuart is funny here.
I'm sure the pardon is a narrowly written, precisely drawn farewell note of compassion for a loved one.
The pardon sweeping, covering offenses that Hunter Biden, quote, has committed or may have committed or taken part in over the past 11 years.
Years is a very specific and not rounded amount of time. So, Hunter, I'll give you a pardon. Well, a few years, 5 years, 10 years. It needs to be 11.
Joining me now is Sky News contributor Kosha Gator. Kosha, let's start in New York City, where the mayor there, Democrat Mayor Eric Adams, is now siding with Donald Trump on the illegal immigration issue. You can't get any clearer than this message.
Those who are here committing crimes, robberies, shooting at police officers, raping innocent people, have been a harm to our country. I want to sit down and hear the plan on how we're going to address them. Those are the people I am talking about, and I would love to sit down with the Board of Czar and hear his thoughts on how we're going to address those who are harming our citizens.
Kosha, this comes after the New York governor, Kathy Hochul, made similar remarks. It seems like they're appreciating now that Trump's mandate is overwhelming. This is what people even in blue city, New York want.
Mm-hmm. That's quite something. We also have those mayors that are saying they'll go to jail before they ever cooperate with them. So I think the left is a little bit scattered and they're figuring it out. But in his case, between immigration, even spending, he came out and said something positive about Doge and Musk recently, crime. He really does sound like a Trump surrogate at this point. And who knows, maybe it's self-preservation because the Biden DOJ indicted him for those bribery corruption charges. And maybe he's figuring out which side his bread is not buttered on, and he's looking at that. Maybe it's political expediency because it's so clear, as you say, where the country's pulse is on these issues and where the popular sentiment is. Or maybe he is one of those, 20% of black men came out and supported Trump. Maybe he's one of them.
Well, it's interesting because they are making that distinction. They're saying illegal immigrants who commit a crime. Kathy Hochul said she'll pick up the phone herself and call ICE and have them deported. So they are not making that blanket statement that if you're here illegally, we're going to back you being deported. But it's still the sort of language we're hearing you wouldn't have heard from Democrats a few years ago.
For sure.
Particularly in New York. Now, the New York Post ran a story on Scott Presler. If you don't know who he is, he played a crucial role in flipping Pennsylvania, the Keystone State, the crucial swing state. He's got an organisation called Early Vote Action that he founded after the 2022 red wave never came about, the midterms there. Let's hear how he handles the media.
I noticed that when you urge people to action, you often include the word
peacefully.
Is that to avoid another Jan 6 type incident?
With all due respect, it's to avoid people like you guys saying that I'm anything but. My motto is to just be super cute, have my data and facts, treat everyone with love and respect, and as you can see, an army of people will follow.
Super cute with data and facts. He's not the stereotypical GOP operative, but his ground game, what he's managed to do in Pennsylvania, really, if the Republicans are serious, they should be replicating that across the country. He has just been hugely effective, and it shows you that even in a country where so much money is involved in politics, you can have a campaign like that it's hugely impactful and is a genuine people-led campaign.
100%. So he emerged in this election as one of the field generals of the ground game apparatus that Republicans always lagged Democrats in, alongside Charlie Kirk and the Turning Point gang, as well as others like Chris Maloney and even Elon Musk was doing a lot in the last 45 days to turn out the vote. And Scott Presler just had this laser focus, a very clearly identified, tangible goal that he's going to out-register and outvote Democrats in Pennsylvania, which Trump won and then lost by razor-thin margins. And he just identified with data 80,000 hunters that had not voted in the last 4 election, but are primed to be Trump supporters. Something like 120,000 truckers. The Amish, this was really funny, there were like 400,000 Amish. And he targeted them and figured out a way to make it easy for them, to vote in a way that works with their norms and customs and all of that. And he helped flip it, and now he has his sights set apparently on New Jersey and other states as well. So it's really interesting where finally the Republican apparatus, not because of the RNC, but because of grassroots people like Scott Presler, have stepped up their ground game that was just so lacking for so long.
Absolutely, and I know the Republican base absolutely adore him, and it challenges again that whole notion that they're not inclusive of people with different backgrounds and sexualities and whatever identity group they belong in. As long as you believe in the cause, you're in the family.
Absolutely, and his communication skills and the fact that he looks like Fabio certainly helps.
Now, there are rumours that the Washington Commanders, what a terrible name, might be bringing back their Redskins moniker after changing their name and logo, in part due to that whole BLM movement, the riots that we saw. What else can you tell us about this potential comeback of sorts? It's hilarious because the survey showed that American Indians, Native Americans, did not care or were not offended by this Redskins moniker. It was the usual suspects, the affluent, white, left-leaning types who were offended on their behalf.
So easily offended, too much time on their hands, and then they just glom on to this cancel culture mob that had taken over. And that was, as you mentioned, stemmed out of BLM, and then you go off and attack a Native American moniker and logo. And in fact, quite the opposite. Some people in the Native American community were actually upset with it because they say that it was actually very nice, and you're sort of paying homage or tribute to this patriarch that the character depicted in that logo, and by taking it away, you're actually being disrespectful. So nothing is concrete yet. It's still discussions are underway, but I do wonder if post the election we see the shift now and where it's more acceptable again, and that woke pendulum swung too hard, and maybe it's coming back. Maybe this is a case in point.
I can imagine merchandise sales won't be as good long term with Commanders as opposed to Redskins. I mean, they had a very iconic brand there that they destroyed. Let's talk about Joe Biden. He may be a lame duck president, but as the Wall Street Journal warns, he still possesses great power. He is the leader of the free world, and he's using that power to possibly cause a great deal of damage to the US, to make life hard for his successor, Donald Trump. And the Journal's Tevi Troy writes, Joe Biden has only 7 weeks left in office, but is still pushing his agenda. His Justice Department and Federal Trade Commission continue to prevent mergers. His State Department is imposing sanctions on Israeli citizens. He's still nominating judges for lifetime appointments. I think that's the one that's worrying a lot of people. And he has just pardoned his son Hunter for a host of misdeeds. How worried should we be about these last weeks? How much damage could he do?
He does hold the power of the most powerful office in the land until high noon on January 20th, and different presidents have taken different approaches. Many throughout history have used that power till the very last minute, and he is clearly taking that approach. Look, some of them, where he's waving the wand of executive orders, those can be reversed fairly easily, just like they're put in. But others, like judicial appointments, that is a worry, because once appointed, especially if it's a young judge, they're going to be on the bench for 30, 40 years. Things like he's putting in some protections in place for unionized labor with federal employees. That's going to directly make it difficult for Trump's policy agenda around cutting the federal government to come into place. And maybe, the deals that he's doing, sending more and more aid to Ukraine and everything else, just makes the picture messier for Trump, but it's 7 weeks, and I think the countdown clocks are getting louder.
Let's just hope there's no more judicial appointments, because they're there for life. They can have a lasting impact. Now, we talked about this last night, Trump's pick for the Drug Enforcement Administrator, the Sheriff of Hillsborough County, Chad Chronister. He's now withdrawn his name from consideration after His arrest of a Florida pastor for holding services during COVID resurfaced and generated significant backlash amongst Trump supporters. I discussed this with Josh Hammer last night. I said this is Trump's first mistake since winning the election. And I'm glad to see that that mistake has so far resolved himself. I'm sure there will be plenty of other mistakes, but this one was really one that concerned a lot of Trump supporters. And it was suggested by his AG, Pam Bondi.
Which is interesting because Pam Bondi, of course, replaced the only other person who withdrew. But in Matt Gaetz's case, he withdrew because there were enemies of MAGA on the other side who he thought he wouldn't get over the line, versus this one withdrew because the base was very upset with what he did. And it is interesting because so DEA is an important drug enforcement agency, and the whole fentanyl crisis, which is aided and abetted by the illegal immigration problem, is a key part, a signature issue of what Trump wants to remedy. So it needs to be a very serious person. And maybe he would have been good at that, maybe not, but just what he did with arresting that pastor is just a bridge too far. And I think once you've done that, there's no coming back.
And it wasn't that one isolated incident. It was other things he did during the COVID era. And then also the softly approach he took to BLM rioters and not enforcing COVID restrictions against them. So, he's got some, I don't know if he could ever remedy the
not with the space
problem. No,
I don't think with the space.
No, there is little forgiving or forgetting when it comes to that sort of area. Before you go, this is now hilarious. Donald Trump has posted this picture on Instagram of him. It's a photoshopped image, obviously, presiding over a rocky mountain range in Canada with the Canadian flag flying proudly following his dinner with Justin Trudeau. Of course, it has since emerged that he suggested perhaps Canada can become the 51st state of the US and Trudeau could be its governor if they can't handle some tariffs. If they can impose tariffs, but they can't handle tariffs the other way, then perhaps really they're not fit to be a country. That was an interesting discussion.
It certainly was. And you just juxtapose, the might of the U.S. economy and the country next to Canada, which is an ally, very similar heritage and all that, but you can sort of see where the mightiness is. And then just you put the leaders, Trump versus Trudeau, you can also see the balance and might. And it's funny, this actually harkens back to the whole Greenland discussion in the last term, where he was talking about, could we buy Greenland? Could we annex Greenland? In humor, they could afford to do it. We're past an era where people take over countries, but it's a very resource-rich place, and America could do it. And he had photoshopped an image of Trump Tower in Greenland somewhere, and this is sort of a page right out of that playbook.
Absolutely. Kosha Gator, thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.